Emily had always been a strong woman. Life had thrown many challenges her way, but she had always managed to face them with courage. However, nothing had prepared her for the loss of her husband Tom. He had been the love of her life, the person she had shared everything with. His sudden death had left her heartbroken, unsure of how to move forward. Tom's passing wasn't just an emotional loss. It was a practical one, too. Emily had to take on the responsibility of raising their two young children, Ella and Jack, on her own. Her life, which had once been filled with plans and laughter, now seemed like a blur of sorrow. At first, Emily tried to focus on her children. She knew they needed her, and she needed to be strong for them. But the truth was, Emily wasn't sure how to be strong anymore. Each day felt like a struggle. The weight of grief weighed heavily on her shoulders. She found herself waking up every morning with the same overwhelming sense of emptiness. There were times when she would sit by the window, staring out at the world, wondering how others managed to keep going when everything inside of her felt broken. As the months passed, Emily realized she could no longer live in this state of sorrow. She had to find a way to support her family. She couldn't just wait for things to get better. The bills piled up and the cost of living kept rising. Emily needed a job, but with her limited skills and the fact that she was a mother to two young children, finding work wasn't easy. She didn't want to leave her kids with a stranger, so she needed something that would allow her to stay at home. One afternoon, while scrolling through the local newspaper, Emily's eyes landed on an advertisement. It was for a job that seemed too good to be true. The ad was looking for someone to cook for a family of 6 children and their father, and the pay was generous. At first, she wasn't sure if this was something she could do. Could she really take on the responsibility of caring for 6 children? But as she read the ad again, she realized it might be her only option. The job required her to cook and manage the household, and it would allow her to stay in her own neighborhood. It was a perfect fit for someone who needed flexibility like her. After a lot of thought and hesitation, Emily decided to apply. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she had no choice. She couldn't keep living in the past, and she couldn't let her children suffer. She needed to take action, even if it meant stepping into an unknown world. The next day, Emily drove to the address listed in the ad. The house she pulled up to was large with a well-kept garden, but it looked cold and empty. As she rang the doorbell, she felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. What was she getting herself into? Would they even like her? She tried to calm her nerves, but her mind raced with questions. The door opened, and standing in front of her was Henry, the father. He looked worn out, as if he hadn't had a good night's sleep in ages. His eyes were tired, and his clothes were simple, but there was something about him that seemed kind and welcoming. He gave her a warm smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Emily could see that he too was carrying a heavy burden. She could only imagine how difficult it must have been for him to raise 6 children on his own. Henry invited Emily inside, and she followed him into the kitchen. The first thing she noticed was how chaotic it was. Dishes were piled up in the sink. The counters were cluttered with food wrappers, and there was a half-eaten sandwich on the table. Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of discomfort. She'd been used to a tidy, organized kitchen, but this was far from it. It felt more like a war zone than a family home. "Sorry about the mess," Henry said with a half-hearted laugh. "It's been like this for a while. I'm not much of a cook, and with the kids' schedules, it's hard to keep up." Emily nodded, trying to hide her surprise. She had expected some mess, but this was something else. Henry led her to the dining room where she was introduced to his 6 children. They were spread out at the table, doing homework or playing with their phones. Emily's eyes went from one child to the next. There was Sarah, the oldest at 16, who had a serious expression on her face and barely acknowledged Emily's presence. Then there was Ben, the 10-year-old who was quiet and shy, looking down at his homework as if he didn't want to be noticed. Lily, the youngest at just 3 years old, was sitting in her high chair, playing with a toy and giggling. The other 3 children, aged between 7 and 13, seemed to be in their own worlds, each doing their own thing. Emily couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for them. These children had lost their mother, just like her own children had lost their father. She could see the pain in their eyes, and it made her heart ache. It reminded her of the way her own children had struggled after Tom's death. She didn't know how she would fit into their lives, but she couldn't help feeling a pull toward them. Henry asked Emily to stay for a while, and they sat down to discuss the details of the job. The position would involve preparing meals for the family, cleaning up afterward, and helping with general household chores. Emily was asked if she could also help with the children's routines, such as making sure they got to school on time and had everything they needed for the day. The job sounded like it would be challenging, but Emily was used to hard work. After some discussion, they agreed on the pay, and Emily decided to take the job. That night, as she sat in her car outside her house, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of uncertainty. Was she really ready for this? Could she handle being around so many children, especially ones who had lost their mother? What if they didn't like her? What if she wasn't good enough? She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. She had to take it, for her children's sake and for her own. The next day, Emily arrived at Henry's house to start her new job. As she walked into the kitchen, she was greeted by the chaos once again. The children were all running around, some yelling, others laughing, but it was clear that they needed someone to take charge. Emily took a deep breath and got to work. She started preparing breakfast, making sure everyone had something to eat before they ran off to school. As she worked, she couldn't help but notice the way the children looked at her. They were curious but cautious. They hadn't quite accepted her yet, and Emily knew it would take time. But deep down, she felt a sense of purpose. She knew that this job wasn't just about cooking meals. It was about becoming a part of their lives, about offering them something they had lost, a mother's love. Emily didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of something that would change her life forever. She had been hired to cook for the family, but she would soon discover that she was meant to be much more than that. She was about to become the mother they had always wished for. The first few days in Henry's house were harder than Emily had imagined. She had thought that cooking meals for a large family might be the most challenging part of the job, but she soon realized that it was much more than just food. As the days passed, Emily began to understand that her real challenge would be fitting into the family dynamic. The house was always busy, 6 children, each with their own needs and personalities, moving in different directions at all times. At times, it felt like the world was spinning faster than she could catch up. The children, though polite, didn't immediately warm to her. Sarah, the oldest, was reserved and distant. She would nod politely when Emily spoke to her, but never initiated a conversation. Sarah acted like she had everything under control, despite the fact that Emily could see the pressure she carried. Emily didn't know if Sarah resented her for taking her late mother's place in the kitchen, or if she simply felt the weight of being the oldest sibling in such a large family. Whatever it was clear Sarah wasn't interested in being close to her. Then there was Ben, the 10-year-old, who seemed to disappear into the shadows. Emily could tell that something was off with him. He was quiet and often kept to himself. At the dinner table, he would hardly speak, and when asked a question, he would mumble his answers, looking down at his plate. Emily didn't want to push him, but she couldn't help but feel like he needed someone to talk to. She had seen his sadness in his eyes, the way he seemed to carry the weight of the world on his young shoulders. It reminded her of her own children when they had first lost their father. The other kids weren't much different. Lily, the youngest, was sweet and playful, but she had the air of a child who missed something. Her mother, of course. The middle children, Anna, Tom, and Luke, were all in their own worlds. Luke, at 7, was the most energetic and would often run around the house, laughing and causing a bit of chaos. Anna, 12, was independent, and Tom, 9, was a little more quiet but still easily excited. They were all adjusting to the loss of their mother in their own ways, and Emily could sense that they didn't know what to make of her. She wasn't their mother, and they weren't ready to let someone fill that role. Emily didn't expect the children to warm to her right away, but she couldn't help but feel a bit lonely. The house was filled with the noise of children, but she felt like an outsider. Henry, too, was distant, as if he were lost in his own thoughts. He appreciated her cooking, but he rarely sat down to share a meal with the children. His mind seemed to be on other things, work, the house, or the overwhelming task of raising 6 children by himself. Emily often found herself alone in the kitchen, making meals for a family that didn't yet know what to make of her. Each evening, Emily would sit with Henry for a few minutes, discussing the day's events. They would talk about what the children needed, what was missing from the house, and how things could improve. Emily tried to offer suggestions, but Henry seemed to take everything in stride. He rarely showed much emotion, though she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. It wasn't just physical tiredness. It was emotional too. The weight of raising his children alone seemed to drain him. At night, when everyone had gone to bed, Emily would lie awake in the guest room staring at the ceiling. She missed her own children. She missed the days when life had felt easier, when her home had been full of laughter and light. Now her world felt like it was full of uncertainty. Could she really make a difference in this family? Could she really step into a mother's role, when the children's hearts still seemed locked away? Despite these challenges, Emily didn't give up. She knew that the children needed stability, even if they didn't realize it yet. She started by focusing on the small things. She made sure the kids had breakfast every morning, ensuring that they left for school with a full stomach and something to look forward to. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Emily would prepare their lunches, pack their school bags, and try to make the mornings feel less chaotic. But even these small gestures weren't always enough. Sarah, who had been in charge before Emily arrived, sometimes seemed annoyed when Emily stepped in. She didn't need help with her homework, and she didn't want someone telling her how to handle her siblings. Emily could see that Sarah was used to carrying the weight of responsibility, and she wasn't ready to share that burden. The other children, especially Ben, were more open to Emily's presence, though they didn't fully trust her yet. Emily tried not to take it personally. She reminded herself that they were grieving, just like she was. Their mother had passed away, and in many ways they were just as lost as she felt. But with each passing day, Emily started to notice small changes. Ben, though quiet, started looking at her with a bit more warmth in his eyes. Anna asked for her help with her math homework one afternoon. Luke, in his usual energetic way, started joking with Emily, calling her the best cook when she made his favorite dish. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Henry, too, began to rely on her more. One evening after dinner, he came into the kitchen and started talking to her about his day. It was the first time he had opened up to her in a way that didn't involve just the kids or the house. He spoke about how difficult it was to keep up with everything, how he missed his wife, and how he felt like he was failing as a father. Emily listened quietly, offering support without saying much. She knew that he didn't need advice. He just needed someone to listen. As the days passed, Emily's role in the family began to shift. She was no longer just the cook. She was becoming a more important part of their lives. It wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always smooth, but Emily knew that it was a step in the right direction. She started to understand the children more, and they in turn began to open up to her. She still had a long way to go, but the small victories were enough to keep her going. She had come to this house to cook, but now she realized that her presence could be much more than that. She wasn't just filling a role. She was becoming a part of this family, whether they realized it or not. One evening, as Emily was cleaning up the dinner table, she heard a loud bang coming from the living room. She rushed to see what had happened and found Ben, the 10-year-old, sitting on the floor with his hands covering his face, sobbing uncontrollably. The other children stood around him, unsure of what to do. It wasn't like Ben to act out like this. He was always the quiet one, the one who kept his feelings to himself. But tonight something had finally broken. Emily immediately knelt down beside him, gently pulling his hands away from his face. His tears soaked her shirt as he tried to speak between sobs, but his words were jumbled, hard to understand. I miss her so much. I can't do it. I can't. His voice trailed off into more sobs. Emily's heart broke at the sight of his pain. She had known that he had been struggling with the loss of his mother, but she had never seen it come out like this. It was as if everything he had been holding inside finally exploded. She hugged him tightly, not saying anything at first, just letting him cry. It was clear that Ben needed to grieve, but he had never allowed himself to do so. He had always been so quiet, so withdrawn. It seemed like he had been trying to protect everyone else, hiding his own sadness behind a wall. But now the dam had broken. As she held him, Emily realized that she was the only one there to comfort him. Henry, despite his good intentions, didn't know how to handle these emotions. The children, too, were unsure of what to do. It was up to her now. She gently stroked Ben's hair, whispering soothing words to him. "It's okay to cry, Ben. It's okay to feel sad. You're not alone." Slowly, his sobs quieted down, and he looked up at her with tear-streaked eyes. "I don't want to be sad anymore," he whispered, his voice shaky. Emily smiled softly, wiping away his tears. "I know you don't, sweetheart, but sometimes we need to let ourselves feel sad so we can heal." It's okay to miss your mom. Ben nodded, his tears slowing down, but his eyes were still full of sorrow. Emily didn't know how long they stayed there on the floor, but she didn't rush him. She knew this moment was important. Ben needed to feel seen, to know that his pain mattered. As she helped him stand up and led him to the couch, Emily was struck by how much more was needed in this house than just meals and chores. She had thought that cooking and cleaning would be her role, but the emotional weight that each of these children carried was so much heavier than she had ever imagined. They needed more than just a caregiver. They needed someone who could help them process their grief, someone who could guide them through the painful process of healing. The next day, Emily took a different approach with the children. Instead of just focusing on the usual routines, she decided to spend more time with each of them individually. She knew that the kids had all been through so much and they each needed to feel understood in their own way. It wasn't easy, especially with Sarah, who still kept to herself. But Emily didn't give up. She started with Ben. She made him his favorite breakfast, pancakes with syrup and fruit, and asked him if he wanted to talk more. Ben hesitated at first, but after a few moments of silence, he spoke. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not allowed to miss her," he said quietly. "Like I'm not supposed to cry, like I should be strong." Emily nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She had felt the same way after losing her husband. "It's okay to miss her," she said softly. "It doesn't make you weak to feel sad. Your mom will always be a part of you. You can be strong and still miss her." Ben looked at her, his eyes full of confusion and longing. "But how do I stop feeling so sad all the time?" he asked, his voice small. Emily smiled gently. "You don't have to stop feeling sad. You just have to let yourself feel it, and then take one step at a time. It won't happen all at once, but slowly, the sadness won't feel as heavy." As Emily spent more time with Ben, helping him navigate his emotions, she began to see small signs of improvement. He was still quiet, but he had started to open up a little more. He even smiled a bit more, though his sadness was still evident. For the first time since she had started working in this house, Emily felt like she was actually making a difference in Ben's life. The next challenge came with Sarah. The older girl had always been distant, as though she were trying to protect herself from the world. Emily knew that Sarah had taken on a lot of responsibility as the eldest child, and it was clear that she felt the weight of caring for her siblings. But Emily also knew that Sarah needed to release her own grief, even if she didn't know how to do so. One afternoon after school, Emily found Sarah sitting alone on the porch, staring out into the garden. It was a rare moment of solitude for Sarah, and Emily didn't want to intrude, but she also knew that this might be her chance to connect with her. She sat down beside Sarah, offering her a soft smile. At first, Sarah didn't say anything. She just looked at her hands, twiddling with the edge of her sleeve. Emily didn't push her. Instead, she said, "I know it's hard, Sarah. I know you feel like you have to be the strong one, but it's okay to not be okay." For a long time, Sarah didn't respond. But finally she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to be weak," she said, looking at Emily with a mixture of frustration and sadness. "I'm the oldest. I have to take care of them. I have to make sure they're okay." Emily nodded, understanding Sarah's struggle. "But who takes care of you, Sarah?" she asked gently. Sarah was silent for a moment before speaking again. "I don't know. I guess I don't have time to think about that." Emily placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You don't have to do it all alone," she said. "You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders. You're allowed to be sad, to feel lost. It's okay to lean on others." Sarah looked up at Emily, her eyes filled with uncertainty. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry, tears streaming down her face. Emily sat beside her, offering comfort without judgment. From that moment on, Sarah began to open up more. She started to share her feelings with Emily and the others, and Emily could see the weight starting to lift off her shoulders. Sarah didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to carry the responsibility of her siblings alone, and Emily was there to remind her of that every day. As the weeks went by, Emily's role in the family became more defined. She wasn't just a cook or a housekeeper anymore. She was a guiding force, someone who helped the children process their grief, understand their emotions, and heal. She wasn't their mother, but in many ways, she was becoming the mother they needed. Through patience, understanding, and a willingness to be there for them, Emily had helped the children take their first steps toward healing. And in doing so, she had begun healing herself too. This part highlights Emily's emotional growth and her increasing connection with the children. It also introduces key turning points in her relationships with Ben and Sarah, emphasizing the importance of patience and emotional support. Let me know if you need further revisions. Over time, Emily's role in the house began to shift in ways she hadn't expected. What had started out as just a job, cooking meals and taking care of the house, had grown into something far deeper. She wasn't just a hired hand anymore. She was becoming a part of the fabric of the family. And slowly, the family itself was starting to change, to heal. The first noticeable difference came in the mornings. When Emily had first started, the mornings had been chaotic. The children would scramble around, not sure if they had everything they needed for school, and Henry would be lost in his own thoughts, often too distracted to manage the hectic start to the day. But now things were different. Emily had set up a routine. She woke up early to prepare a warm breakfast for everyone, making sure each child had something healthy to eat before they went off to school. She helped them pack their lunches, double-checking that no one had forgotten their homework or their sports gear. The mornings weren't perfect. There were still a few late starts and rushed moments, but they were better. The children, though still adjusting, had started to rely on her. They were beginning to understand that there was someone they could count on to make their day start off right. They weren't rushing out the door in a frenzy anymore. The quiet moments around the breakfast table had become a time of connection, however small. Emily would ask each child how they felt about the day ahead, and slowly, they began to talk about their hopes, fears, and little bits of their lives outside of the home. For Sarah, the oldest, things were also changing. Emily had seen a significant shift in Sarah's behavior. At first, Sarah had kept everyone at arm's length. She had been the perfect, responsible older sibling, but there had been no room for her own emotions. She had buried her grief under a thick wall of duty, but now Emily was seeing Sarah's walls begin to crack. She wasn't shutting herself away as much. She started to spend more time with the younger children, playing with them or helping them with their schoolwork. Sarah would even make time to talk with Emily, though their conversations were still mostly about practical matters at first. But it was a start. One evening, after the younger kids had gone to bed, Emily found Sarah sitting on the back porch staring at the sunset. Emily, knowing that Sarah still struggled with the loss of her mother, decided to join her. She didn't push Sarah to talk, but after a long silence, Sarah finally spoke. "I don't know what I'm doing," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a hint of vulnerability Emily hadn't heard before. "I'm trying to be everything they need, but sometimes I feel like I'm just pretending. I don't know how to be their mom." Emily, understanding the depth of Sarah's words, gently responded, "You don't have to be their mom, Sarah. You just need to be you. You've been carrying so much responsibility on your shoulders, and I know it's hard, but you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do it all on your own." Sarah looked at Emily, her eyes searching for some kind of reassurance. "But what if I fail? What if I can't help them like Mom did?" Emily smiled softly, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You're not meant to replace your mom. You're meant to be yourself, and that's enough. They need you, but they also need you to take care of yourself. You're still a kid, Sarah. It's okay to lean on others." For the first time, Sarah let herself feel the weight of the situation. She wasn't just the oldest sister anymore. She was allowed to be a young person too, with her own struggles and feelings. Emily's words seemed to lift a heavy weight off her shoulders. She wasn't expected to do it all. She could be both strong and vulnerable, and that was okay. The change in Sarah didn't happen overnight, but over time, she became less of a mother figure and more of a sister to the other kids. She still helped with the younger ones, but she was no longer the sole caretaker. Emily had started taking on more of that role, allowing Sarah to reclaim her own childhood bit by bit. Ben, too, was changing. Though he still had his quiet, introverted nature, he had begun to open up more, especially to Emily. He would sit with her in the kitchen after school, talking about little things, his favorite TV shows, the books he was reading, or the things that bothered him. He wasn't the same silent boy who had struggled to express his feelings. Emily could tell he was still grieving, but now he was allowing himself to feel those emotions. The breakthrough had come during that night when he had finally allowed himself to cry. Since then, he had been slowly learning to express himself in ways he never had before. One evening, Emily sat down next to Ben after dinner and asked him about his day. At first he mumbled the usual fine, but Emily wasn't ready to give up. Gently she asked, "What was the best part of your day?" Ben looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. For a long moment he didn't answer. But then, unexpectedly, he said, "I played soccer with Luke and Tom after school. It felt good. I didn't think about Mom the whole time." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with happiness. "That's wonderful, Ben. It's okay to have fun. It's okay to enjoy things, even when you're sad." Ben smiled shyly, a rare but beautiful moment of joy flickering in his eyes. That smile was a sign of his healing, of his slowly returning to the world he had been hiding from. Emily felt proud of him. The changes weren't just in the children. Henry, too, was beginning to soften. The man who had been so distant, so caught up in his own grief, had started to open up more. Emily could see it in the way he interacted with the children. He had started spending more time with them after dinner, asking them about their day and even helping with their homework. It wasn't perfect, and there were still days when he looked overwhelmed, but the small shifts were important. One evening, Henry sat down with Emily after the children had gone to bed. For the first time, he really looked at her, his eyes full of gratitude. "I don't know how you've done it," he said quietly. "I've been so lost in trying to keep everything together, and I didn't realize how much the kids were suffering. You've done more than cook meals. You've helped them find themselves again." Emily looked at him, feeling a warmth spread through her. "It wasn't just me. You've been there for them too. But it's okay to lean on others. It's okay to let people in." Henry nodded, looking down at his hands. "I've been so focused on trying to be everything to them that I forgot to be something for myself. But you've shown me what it means to be a family. I think I'm finally starting to understand what it means to truly be there for them." Emily smiled, knowing that this moment marked a new beginning for the family. They had all come so far, and while they still had challenges to face, they were no longer strangers to each other's hearts. Slowly but surely, the house that had once felt so broken was starting to heal. The laughter that echoed through the hallways wasn't just noise. It was a sign that they were coming back together. Emily had started this journey as a stranger to the family, hired to cook for them. But now she was a part of something much bigger. She wasn't just filling a role, she was a mother figure to them, and they had become her family too. The walls between them had come down, and in their place a new kind of love had grown. One born from understanding, patience, and the willingness to heal together. The weeks passed, and with each day, the changes in the house became more noticeable. What had once been a house full of sadness and uncertainty was now filled with laughter, warmth, and a sense of belonging. The children were no longer the distant, disconnected individuals Emily had first met. They had become a team, supporting each other, learning to love and trust once again. Henry, too, had begun to grow into a better version of himself, a father who was present emotionally and physically. And Emily, the woman who had come into their lives as a stranger, had become the glue that held them all together. One of the clearest signs of the family's transformation was the way the children had begun to interact with each other. Sarah, who had once carried the burden of responsibility alone, now shared that load. She still had her moments of doubt, but she wasn't trying to be the perfect older sister anymore. She had learned to lean on Emily and the others, and as a result she had become more open with her emotions. She no longer felt like she had to hide behind a wall of strength. Instead, she was learning to express her vulnerability and, in doing so, was becoming a more caring, understanding older sibling. One afternoon, after school, Sarah and Emily sat together in the kitchen, talking as Sarah helped with the dinner preparations. The house was quiet, with the younger kids outside playing in the yard and Henry working in his office. Emily looked at Sarah, noticing how much she had changed. There was a softness in her expression now, a sign that she no longer felt the heavy burden of trying to hold everything together by herself. "I don't feel so lost anymore," Sarah admitted as she chopped vegetables for the evening meal. "I know I'll never stop missing Mom, but it doesn't feel so impossible to get through the day." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with pride for the girl who had started this journey, feeling like she had to carry the world on her shoulders. "You're doing great, Sarah. You don't have to do everything on your own anymore. You have a family to rely on." Sarah smiled back, a genuine, relaxed smile that Emily hadn't seen in a long time. "I think I'm starting to believe that." The shift in the children wasn't just emotional. The house itself had transformed too. It was no longer a place where everyone walked on eggshells. afraid to speak their minds or share their feelings. Now it was a home, a real warm, welcoming place. The dinner table, once a place of silent tension, had become a space for conversation, laughter, and connection. The children still had their moments of disagreement, but they knew how to talk things through now. They had learned how to express their feelings and work through their problems, and Emily had been the one to show them how to do that. It wasn't just the children who had changed. Henry had begun to play a more active role in his children's lives. He spent more time with them, whether it was helping them with homework, playing board games, or simply sitting down to talk. His presence in the home felt stronger, more grounded. Emily had noticed that he had started to let go of some of his emotional walls, allowing himself to show his children that he too was vulnerable. He had learned that being a father didn't mean being perfect. It meant being there, being honest, and sharing in the tough moments as well as the joyful ones. One evening, after a particularly lively dinner where everyone had shared their highlights of the day, Henry sat down with Emily in the living room. The children had scattered to their rooms, finishing their chores or getting ready for bed, but the warmth of the evening still lingered in the air. "You've done more than just cook for us," Henry said quietly, looking at Emily with gratitude in his eyes. "You've helped us become a family again. I didn't realize how much we needed someone like you. Someone who could guide us through all the pain but also bring the joy back into our lives. I don't know what we would have done without you." Emily felt a lump in her throat, not from sadness but from a deep sense of fulfillment. When she had first walked into this house, she had never imagined that she would have this kind of impact. She had come to cook and clean, to help a grieving family get by. But in doing so, she had become a part of their healing process, and in many ways, they had become a part of hers as well. "It hasn't been easy," Emily admitted, "but it's been worth it. I never expected to step into this role, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad to be here with all of you." Henry smiled, his expression softening. "I think we're all in a better place now, and that's because of you, Emily. You've been more than just a helper to us. You've been a mother, a guide, a friend. We're lucky to have you." The words meant more to Emily than Henry could ever know. It was in that moment that she realized how much she had grown, how much she had found her place in this family. It wasn't just about cooking meals anymore. It was about being there for them in a way that truly mattered. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she thought about how far they had all come. The house no longer felt empty and cold. There was laughter, love, and even moments of shared sorrow, but it was all part of the healing process. Emily's own grief had found a way to coexist with the happiness she now felt in the house. She had come to this family to offer something to them, but in return, they had given her something she hadn't expected, a sense of belonging. The next day, as the family sat down for breakfast, Emily was greeted with something she hadn't anticipated. The children, who had once been unsure of her, now seemed to have accepted her fully. They smiled at her as they entered the kitchen, each of them taking a moment to acknowledge her with a warm greeting or a casual joke. It wasn't just the polite, distant acknowledgement they had given her at the beginning. It was real, genuine affection. As Emily placed a plate of scrambled eggs in front of Ben, he smiled up at her. "Thanks for making breakfast, Emily," he said shyly. "It's always the best part of the day." The others chimed in with their own versions of gratitude, each of them showing in their own way that they had come to see Emily as part of the family. Sarah, who had always been quiet about her emotions, gave her a quick but meaningful hug. "I don't know what we would have done without you," she said softly. Emily's heart swelled with emotion. In that moment, she knew that she had found something truly special, something that had nothing to do with her job as a cook and everything to do with the love that had grown between them all. The family wasn't perfect. They still had their challenges, their moments of frustration, and their occasional disagreements. But they had come together, and that was what mattered most. They had found a new rhythm, a new understanding of each other, and they had created a new kind of family, a family born from shared grief, love, and the willingness to heal together. As Emily looked around the table at the smiling faces of the children, at Henry, who no longer seemed so weighed down by the world, she realized that in many ways, she had found her own healing too. The family that had once felt like strangers had become her own. In that quiet moment, as the laughter of the children filled the room and the smell of breakfast filled the air, Emily felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. She had been hired to cook for this family, but she had ended up becoming the mother they wished for, and in return they had given her a place to belong, a home that she could finally call her own.